This is a talk I've given many times before. I usually give it under the title, Umana Anya, Makola Me, and the KGB. I gotta add in, Chip's name should be in there, but it doesn't rhyme or alliterate with the rest, so. But just so you know, I'm gonna hit a lot of topics. I hope I capture your curiosity. I hope your head spins after this talk today. And I hope that you go to connect with me on LinkedIn. Under my featured page, there's a lot more details about these that you can dig in if I have, in fact, captured your curiosity. So we're gonna start here in the lovely state of Wisconsin, the Milwaukee Rotary. We're gonna take you to the front lines of Ukraine. We'll trek back across Europe, and we're gonna do it a few times. So, like I said, buckle up. And as Samuel Jackson said in Jurassic Park, hold on to your butts. We're gonna go for a ride. So, I always like to start this talk by talking about silver linings, because as our invocations just, war is horrible. There's no upside. But you can still look at silver linings. And for me, the silver linings is all the unbelievable, incredible people and organizations that I've encountered over the past 3+ years. There's this saying that people say that the friendships, the bonds that are forged in war form more quickly and more profoundly and more deeply than any relationships that you ever will develop in your life. And before this, I'd never had a full appreciation of that, but I can tell you, and I hope this talk captures just how true that statement is. That was a purposely busy slide just to give you just a taste of everybody's involved. I'm gonna focus in though on some of the key organizations that I've invested most of my time and capital in over the past 3 years that have made a lot of some of this seminal work possible. But I'm gonna start with outlining some of the characters. And I'll start with me and the KGB, because you got a guy, just to give you, I think some of you know the background, but the why of it all. And it starts with this lady, you might know her, Dr. Natalia Uboha of the UOW Carbone Cancer Center. This is my wife. She grew up in Lviv, Ukraine, was a Soviet pioneer girl who sang songs to Grandfather Lenin. She went to Lviv School Number 4, the Linguistic Gymnasium, otherwise known as Soviet Spy Training School Number 4, So she infiltrated the United States through O'Fallon, Missouri as a high school exchange student, went on to college in Missouri, and we linked up as MD PhD students at Yale, and that's where we flipped her to our side. So I make the joke, but she actually factually did literally grow up right across the street from the KGB substation for Western Europe. This is Vitovsky Street, KBG substation. It's now part of the SBU, Security Services for Ukraine. This picture was taken in 2000. Key points to take away, don't mess with Texas. So my wife's family always loved it when I would buy up Soviet paraphernalia back in 2000 to give to family and friends, but I had to authenticate it with pictures in front of old Soviet iconography, like this statue of Lenin in 2000 that was toppled during the Maidan. That's it now in 2024, what's left of there. Another huge character in all this, who you all know, is UMANA, the Ukrainian Medical Association of North America. They were key and instrumental in starting the program that we then joined on for out of our Germantown warehouse, in terms of sending just hundreds, if not thousands of tons of medical material aid to Ukraine during, particularly that's where our focus was the first year of the war. My good friend and colleague, Dr. Anya Mahutak, she's the brains behind the operation and was instrumental. I think a lot of you recognize that it was our Chicago partners. Like, we packed up in Milwaukee and sent it all to them, and they got everything over. I think you might recognize a few of the faces on this slide. Rotary was the backbone of our volunteer efforts in organizing. We mobilized our medical colleagues here in Wisconsin, including a huge contingent from the Madison area, but also our Milwaukee friends, which is actually what brought me back and got me back to Freighter. Dr. Oksana Saiko in particular, I think some of you remember, she's a rehab physician. I'm actually going to Ukraine and we'll be seeing her next week as part of the rehab programs we're doing there that Dr. Anya Mahutak helped set up and arrange. Another key character in this, as you all know, is Anya. Anya is really big brains behind this operation and just as I like to say, a force of nature. I mean, the logistics and the administrative work that's gone on behind all of this and through her organizations, Be an Angel, which is based in Germany, and Friends of Be an Angel, based here in Milwaukee, to coordinate the efforts for a lot of the organizations we've connected with to do the aid, and I mean, way above and beyond, I think, what anybody even realizes. But Anya's, we like to call her in the group, Commandant Cuckoo, because no matter how crazy the idea is, if Anya says we're gonna do it, we click our heels, salute, and on our way. And this is just how crazy she is. So just to give you some numbers just to wrap your heads around, through Anya and her group alone, and the work we did in the Germantown and everything related and everything that came after, we have done over $60 million of material aid into Ukraine through our warehouses that we had here in the US and our warehouses that we have based in Lviv and our distribution networks. Here's where the crazy part happens. You all were a part of our campaign to send close to 2,000 generators in the first winter of the war when Russia was weaponizing, because Anya recognized just how important energy infrastructure was going to be hit that first year before everybody else, and did so and shelled out her own cash for $2.4 million worth of generators, which she then fundraised for after the fact. That's why she's Commandant Cuckoo. That work, though, brought together an incredible array of partners for the fundraising and distribution. Anya's work was, spearheading this, or Be an Angel, was recognized with an Anthem Award, Gold Award last year. I actually got to be on the ground as part of it, and that was my first trip to Ukraine before the first anniversary of the war. And this is us loading generators into one of our partners' distribution vans. That's me with Thomas Humphrey, one of our main partners in the German side. We stopped by the warehouse, the Umana warehouse, and filled up whatever space we had left over with medical supplies. This is them heading through into the Donetsk region, passing a burnt-out Russian tank in Vuhledar to finally make the delivery, in this one case, to Kramatorsk, which is going to be a reiterative city that I mentioned. But we did it all over Ukraine. And Anya, that would not have happened without Anya, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Another big character is Makola, but it's actually Makola's. Oli is laughing because she knows what's coming. This is Makola Ptovenko, and he's like our Ukrainian side of Anya. There's no way I call him the chief executive officer of everything. He's the CEO. He's also well known as having the grumpiest picture face smile of any Ukrainian I know. He's in close competition with the General Kirill Budanov, the head of the Military Intelligence Directorate. We're not sure who wins. In fact, some of us aren't even sure if maybe they're the same person. So, so this is Makola.
Good friend Makola, who does not know how to do a big smile.
I'm doing that all right.
He's Mr. Grumpy Face for all of the pictures.
I'm smiling.
You are Mr. Grumpy Face.
We tell him to warm up before he tries to smile, because I think he hurts himself every time he does. But whether Makola is being a grumpy face, 3-year-old being stubborn on a tricycle, he's really actually, we like to call him our international man of mystery. I like to say he's my KGB handler, because Makola does so many things, involved in so many things, he's got to be security services or something. But hey, he is actually an incredible guy. Before the war, he's an avid scuba diver, he's flipping out in the gym. I can guarantee you he has a really grumpy face behind that helmet that you can't see. But Makola is just amazing, and some of us think he may even have some side operations with that scuba diving background, clandestine, but that's Makola, and Makola is our connection to, one of our main connections to the front lines, and that's where, this is a map of the front lines. I'm gonna focus in on that number 2 region. That's the Avdiivka, Bakhmut, Chasiv Yar region of the front lines, which has, been an enormously huge hot spot. The city I mentioned already, Kramatorsk, where those generators were delivered, is gonna be a recurrent topic in this talk. And that's where the Makola, Dr. Michael Samata, so Makola means Michael in Ukrainian. So Dr. Michael Samata, he's a trauma surgeon from the US, came up through Yale, Cleveland Clinic, some fantastic places. He's been one of our lead surgeons actually operating in theater on the front lines. This is him with another great colleague, Mariana Bilic. That's Mike with the other Makola. Mike thinks he's Makola's favorite American, but clearly it's me. This is Mike right outside Bakhmut at one of the stabilization points, mobile military hospitals, with these gentlemen here who are some of the most amazing surgeons and critical care team I've ever met in my entire life. And I'm gonna talk more about them, and you might have seen them in some of the photos that we've shared with you guys. We call them Dmitro and Brothers Sobko, Dr. Beshley, Dr. Roman Sobko, and Dr. Andriy Sobko, the two brothers. And they are one of the military physician surgical teams that we support. Dr. Beshley has actually risen, they're all majors in the AFU, and Dr. Beshley has actually been one of the commanders for a lot of the frontline regions and built a lot of the mobile military hospitals there. This is Dr. Beshley in theater at I think this was near Avdiivka, may have been Kharkov, but just to give you a flavor of like the type of situations. So this operating room in the middle is one that they built and that we sent the supplies to, the equipment that's there. And this is how they have to operate. This next photo is of Dr. Serko, a neurosurgeon who operates at Mechnikov in Dnipro, which is the main hub. Anybody who's wounded on the front lines actually will filter through Mechnikov. Russia's purposely attacked Mechnikov sometime this past fall. This was Dr. Serko, who was doing open brain surgery at the time, and he recorded this video after the hit.
Зараз буде треш-контент, але ти не розстроюйся сильно. Ось все, я робив операцію,
That's his
а ось все
patient.
вилетіло в вікно.
That's the blown out windows. That's his surgical tray
Ось
covered
такі
in
діла. У нас тут
glass.
відкрився портал.
And he had to just carry on. So these are the types of conditions that these gentlemen operate on. And this is Dr. Sobko, who you see in this upper picture you might recognize that guy, President Zelensky. In between them is General Andriy Verba, one of the head commanders for the Eastern Front. That was me with Dr. Beshley and Dr. Sobko in Lviv around the same time we were doing the generator project. But this bottom photo shows these guys have literally given up their lives. They've seen, Dr. Beshley has a daughter who was born right at the beginning of the war, who he's seen maybe a total of 3 to 4 months over the past 3.5 years. That's how much they've had to do. And these were brilliant, accomplished physicians in their civilian practices who, as we say, now have to carry guns over their white coats as part of their service and their duty for their country. They're a key aspect of giving us all of the really critical information on, are we providing the right aid in the right place at the right time? This is a talk that I've, Dmitro has given and that we help translate for some of their presentations abroad, where he talks about the devices that we give, the monitors, the defibrillating devices, the military grade ventilators that are so critical, the rapid volume infusers, blood chemical analysis devices, warming devices, and pound for pound, one of the most important things, I'm taking about a dozen of these with me on Friday, handheld portable ultrasounds. And Aaron, would you mind pressing play on this? This is Major Yevhen Kozma, and this video, if it plays, that's the heart. And there's a piece of shrapnel in the heart that they were able to identify and remove without a CT scanner because of this little device right here that connects to their phone. And they can, so you see the bright thing in the middle of the heart? That's a piece of shrapnel. So pound for pound, this is one of the, dollar for dollar, this is one of the most powerful devices that we send along. Now, this is the last Makola that I want to mention before moving on, and this is Makola Zabazchuk. This is my wife's cousin, who was killed in Kramatorsk after returning from a combat mission behind enemy lines in Bakhmut the first summer of the war. And so that's sort of the flavor of the front lines, and somebody who I've worked a lot to tell these stories, and you all might have copies of his book and seen his talk, and if you don't have a copy of the book, make sure you go over to that table over there and pick one up before you leave. It's a great read over your morning coffee, a little bit of serious, read, and again, don't mess with Texas or Ukraine. I also like to point out, check out the acknowledgement. Makola, the first Makola, Ptovenko, I've mentioned, he's ridiculously humble and says that he's not important. I was like, Makola, go look at Chip's book. You were like the first person mentioned. I didn't make it to like 10 down, but at least I beat Mary. So in the mentioning. But Chip's book is just fantastic. Chip is a person that literally blows my mind every time I sit and talk with him. The people he knows, the things he's done, the things he's seen. And I've had the distinct honor and privilege of traveling around the world talking about the work in Ukraine with him. This is us in London, talking to the American International Broadcasting group about our work with none other than Salima Min. And by the way, Chip has a film debut tomorrow in Milwaukee that's about his work with Salima Min and Salima Min's father that literally led to We Are the World. If you don't believe me, go to the film festival tomorrow and see more about it. I get to add to my resume that I am an off-Broadway thespian. So this was Chip and I making our off-Broadway debut at the Triad Theater in Manhattan, talking about our work to a crowd in New York. Rosome, our friends at Rosome came and supported that. You'll turn to page 13. Now my wife always tells me, tell your audience what you're going to tell them so you don't lose them. So I'm going to give you 3 little vignettes that are from Chip's book with a little bit more background about how these stories were developed. So on page 13 of the book is this picture of Mars Field at Lechakov Cemetery. So Grumpy Face Makola is the one that took Chip there. And this place is important because my wife's cousin was one of the first ones buried at Lechakov in Mars Field. And when I first visited his grave near the first anniversary, there were only a few hundred graves there. Last time I was there, there's probably close to 3,000. That's the real impact of the war. That's me at his gravesite. Chip does a treatment on hospitals number 8 and Unbroken in his book. The story about Yulia Noleski, I'm pretty sure it was from Hospital 8, which is the National Burn Center. You guys might recognize this guy, Taras Haba, my brother-in-law. He's an anesthesiologist that used to, in his early career, work at Hospital 8. We have lots of friends and family that are there where Yulia Noleski were treated. This is us with Dr. Michael Samata, Dr. Hudson Berry, Walter Reed Military Hospital, former lead of trauma, and an old family friend, Oris Bristlepuk. This is him in his young days, hanging out with my sister-in-law, Uliana. He was close friends with Uliana and Taras. So these hospitals and places, they're more than just stories. These are like where our family, we have 3 generations of physicians in my wife's family. This is a really powerful story, and it's going back to the city of Kramatorsk. This is another one of the topics Chip treats in the book. Victoria Amelina was a novelist, an activist, a poet, like Chip, that has done some incredible work, and she was in Kramatorsk the summer after my wife's cousin was killed, and Kramatorsk, and was killed in a directed missile strike. A Russian spy directed the missile strike. There were not 11 people killed, there were actually 13 people killed. A lot of people know about Amelina, but what they don't know is that the reason for the missile strike, and Melissa, can you press play on that middle? Thank you. I got the call about an hour or 2 after that missile strike occurred, before it had hit the news. And I was sent this video because that gentleman on the ground is Cristiano Zeldin. He's a U.S. Marine Infantry vet. He was working for an NGO, was at the same pizzeria in Kramatorsk, and was injured when it hit. He survived. But another Marine was there, and Ukrainian security services tell us that this was the reason for the strike. This is Frank Torici. He was a U.S. Marine vet that had served over a year and a half in the Foreign Services division of Ukrainian Armed Forces, and we're told that the Russian spy that was monitoring the pizzeria that sent the videos that directed the missile strike was specifically targeting him. He did not survive. We got involved because the family and the Marine vets that were working with Cristiano were obviously, wanted to make sure his family was in community, that he was getting the best care. We helped with his evacuation. And Dr. Michael Samata, this was crazy. Anya was in Kiev when this happened. She had just seen Michael Samata. Michael was leaving Kiev, passing through Kramatorsk, which is his mother's hometown, interestingly, on his way to Bakhmut, that picture I showed you earlier with Brothers Sopko and Dr. Beshley. And so people had called me because they thought I was in country, and I was actually on my way to Austria. I was like, no, but I know who is, and I called Michael and Anya, and they helped with a lot of the coordination to get Cristiano safely and taken care of, going from the Donetsk region, Kramatorsk, through Dnipro, that Mechnikov hospital that was hit by the missile strike that I showed you, to Kiev, and to the premier hospital in Kiev, Filifania. This is Dr. Taras Malay at Filifania recently. And Christian gave me permission to use this picture because I was in daily communication with his family and the friends there. This was him at Filifania. It took about 2 months or more to get him to a place where he could safely come back to the United States, but he sent me this picture of him recently with his girlfriend in New York. He's doing great. And just to reiterate, that missile strike site, that pizzeria, just barely a mile or two from where my wife's cousin and 2 of his fellow members of his unit were killed in a missile strike coming back from Bakhmut. So that's the front lines. Now I want to pivot, and I'm going to have to move fast to stay on time. But Ukraine has enormous needs. It's going to end up being the highest per capita disabled amputee population, veteran population probably in the world, if it's not already. Between 1% to 10% will be amputees and or disabled. 25 to 50% have diagnosable mental health disorders, anxiety, depression, full-scale PTSD, and I can tell you some stories of the PTSD that would blow your mind, and the situations that cause it. But I'm going to first take you to the Austrian Alps because that's where we started a program to really begin to address this and develop a methodology that could be scaled in Ukraine. And did this with my friends at Mountain Seed Foundation, who are some of the most amazing people I've ever met in my life. I got to bring my entire family on this part of the journey to participate. This journey started at the U.S. Naval Academy, and if you'll squint, you might notice that dashing debonair guy wearing a Vichy Ivanka tux, standing behind a woman in purple. Well, that woman in purple is none other than, the brilliant former ambassador to Kiev, Maria Ivanovich, who was one of our early supporters. The real person, though, in that photo that's been the brain trust of this and pushing it forward is former Lieutenant Commander Nathan Schmidt, United States Lieutenant Colonel, he went on to become, along with his wife, a key diplomat in Kiev under Maria Ivanovich. He and my brother served together along with my sister-in-law. The 2 of us connected at day 1 of the war, even before I'd connected with Umana, because they had boots on the ground in logistics and networks that we used very early to get our supply aid distributed. Our real connection, though, is Nathan and I are both Wolverines. An homage to the greatest movie ever made, Red Dawn. I could literally give, lectures on this. But you've already seen Mountain Seed Foundation in some of the photos I showed. They were one of our partners, like I said, that helped with logistics and distribution. So this was me loading up one of their distribution vans that went to Kramatorsk. The gentleman circled is Volodymyr. He's the son of one of the co-founders who actually did the delivery. But that takes us to the Austrian Alps, and you're like, wow, how is the Austrian Alps related to Ukraine and mental health? That makes no sense. Well, I'm only going to tell you a little bit. You got to do your own homework, and you can go watch our 60 Minutes piece rise for the full story about how that happened. And this was one of the most watched pieces on 60 Minutes last year. And here's a very meta picture, me taking a picture of my daughter, watching them take a picture. So this is us at the top of Kitzsteinhorn, the fourth tallest peak in the Rhone region of Austria, while Scott Pelley interviews my friend Dan Knassen. And if you watch the piece, keep an eye out for my little girls. So that's my 13-year-old. And Melissa, can you hit play on that? That's my wife and daughter.
The first days of training looked dangerous,
That's my 13-year-old.
but there was always an expert on the rope.
That's a little late.
One professional guide for every 4 children
All right,
who eased the
can
tension
pause.
slowly.
All right, and so the point isn't about my kids or American kids. The point's about Ukrainian kids. And I want to point out one and pay close attention to this if you go back and watch the feature. So that's my 9-year-old, and standing next to her is a very important little girl, Milana of Mariupol. Mariupol might ring a bell. You guys ever hear of 20 Days in Mariupol? Probably the most watched documentary on Ukraine. Won an Oscar award for documentary feature films. You might not realize that there was a second movie in the running for an Oscar that year for the documentary shorts, Camp Courage. You can watch it on Netflix. It's about Milana of Mariupol and her grandmother that's standing behind her, Olga. And this is Milana. So I'll let you watch the movie to learn more, but just a synopsis, Milana was 4 years old during the first invasion of Mariupol in 2015, when the Russians first took Mariupol. The Ukrainians recaptured it, but Milana lost her leg and her mother in an artillery strike in 2015. The Ukrainians put up this mural of her as a 4-year-old little girl with a prosthetic leg hugging a teddy bear. Well, when the Russians took Mariupol in 2022 and murdered over 30,000 people in Mariupol, they also purposely destroyed that mural in that building. Milana and her family fortunately escaped, and we linked up with them in Austria. And she was a part of our camps. Max Lowe made an incredible documentary about her, which is a really inspiring story, that you can destroy Mariupol, but you can't destroy the people of Mariupol. The whole experience was surreal, watching my wife be the personal translator for Scott Pelley. My 13-year-old helped lead him down from Kitzsteinhorn. The gentleman in the red on the right, that's Sir Victor Saunders, one of the most accomplished mountaineers in the world, summited to Everest probably 14 times, giving my daughter and the Ukrainian kids personal climbing lessons. But it was just, there's one of the most profound experiences I've ever had in my life. And it wasn't just about fun camps in Austria. There's a method to the madness. So this is deploying a special type of, what we would call community-based techniques for mental health care called positive psychology. I'm not going to go into the details, but I just like to capture it. It's a rapid deployment, experiential mental health first aid vehicle. And it's a vehicle that you can deploy anywhere, you can scale it, and you can even take it to Ukraine from the Austrian Alps. And so that's where I'm going to pivot to how we get to the Paralympics and back to Ukraine, where 25 to 50% of the population has mental health disorders. And that's where we come to the Paralympics. And a little bit of Russia, because Russia loomed large over a lot of this, going back to Sochi. And so here's Dan, my friend Dan Knassen. He was a Naval Academy classmate of Nathan Schmidt. That video is him coming down that same cliff on prosthetic legs that you heard my daughter screaming as she rappelled earlier. My wife translating for him during some of our sessions. No way to describe Dan other than he's an American superhero. He was a Navy SEAL lieutenant commander who lost both legs in Afghanistan to an IED. He went on to be operated at Walter Reed Military Hospital by one of the gentlemen, or the trainees of one of the gentlemen who you're going to see in just a sec. He's an avid water sports man. He's won more medals in the Paralympics than I think any other American. He's an amazing guy. And we joke, though, that Dan doesn't lose often, but if he does, it's usually to a Ukrainian. So this is him with Taras Radek. Radek got the gold, Dan got the teddy bear. So And it brings us to this gentleman. And Dan and I had talked very early on about finding ways to connect him with his old teammates or the people that he competed against, and to find ways to connect him to Ukrainian veterans, because there's a veteran-veteran connection, particularly those who have been wounded in war, that you can't reproduce that connection any other way. And the way we did that was through Valery Suskevich. He's the president of the Ukrainian Paralympics Committee. He was a Soviet Paralympic champion in swimming because he had lost the use of his legs to polio as a toddler. He was the first disabled member of Ukrainian parliament, so he's been an advocate for the disabled long before the war even began. He's also the man that was in Sochi, Russia, along with Dan, when the real war started in Crimea. Everybody remembers that the war started after the close of the Olympics, but people don't remember that the Paralympics always starts after the Olympics. And Valery was there, and Valery got summoned personally by Vladimir Putin because they caught wind that Valery was going to stage a protest. And you see, Valery he's holding up a certain finger. Well, let's just say he gave old Vlad a different finger when Vlad told him not to protest. And so this is Mikhailo Tkachenko, who's a biathlete that Dan used to compete with, who went out as the Ukrainian protester during that open ceremonies in Sochi. And Valery has developed, what we would really call a state-of-the-art, rehabilitation program, and they already had it up and running because he runs the Paralympic Center. This is the Paralympic Center in the Carpathian Mountains. And a lot of those hospitals that you've seen, Unbroken and others that have developed rehabilitation programs, they modeled it on this place, because this place was already developed to develop the top disabled athletes in Ukraine. It's nestled in the Carpathian Mountains right next to this little nub of the border with Poland. You can almost throw a rock into Poland from the center. Chip did our advanced scouting work at the center with Valery. I showed up a couple months later with my team, and just to see all of the rehabilitation they're doing.
Якщо ми говоримо про навички володіння кріслом колісним, то піднімання по сходах і опускання без допомоги є найпотужнішою.
And this is just one of these serendipity stories. So during that first visit, I was there with Dr. Hudson Berry. He was head of trauma for Walter Reed Military Hospital. He trained some of the people that did the operations on Dan. That first visit, we were there, and this soldier, Anatoly, was there. And he'd been spinal cord injury on the front lines, had just gotten out of the hospital and starting his rehab. This was in Christmas, around Christmas time. And I'll come back with him, but we got the rigor. They tossed us in. We had to participate and got to see the whole thing. We got to tour the facilities, see just how state of the art. Needless to say, we left a little exhausted. I came back though with the team that works mostly on mental health, this rapid deployment, vehicle. This is the Mountain Sea team in Lviv with Grumpy Face Makola. We also, by the way, some of you might recognize Dr. Elena Renkas, who we helped sponsor for training in trauma. We got to see and introduce her to the team while we were in Kiev. She's a part of our UMed program, which I'll just briefly touch on in a couple minutes. But Dan and I went to the center, and Dan got the full tour.
You ready there?
No snow on the ground then, but he got more the spa treatment. This is Dan in their Olympic pool, getting to reconnect with some of the people that he competed with and making this connection with Anatoly. And this is Dan doing a art therapy session where he made this pisanka egg with Anatoly. And they connected so immediately and so profoundly. And Anatoly invited us for beers, but we were like, okay, it's a training center. We won't do beers, but we'll play pool till like 2 a.m. And the bond that they made has been incredible. And Anatoly has done so well at that center that they've now tapped him for the Paralympics team in the same sport as Dan. And Dan's now competed against him and sees him all the time, and WhatsApp connects with him. They've competed in Italy, Norway, Finland. And this has been, you can go learn more about all this and go to our Be an Angel page about veteran rehabilitation. Anatoly's video and full story is there. We've been working with Valery and others to try to develop this further, because Mountain Seed's motto is climb to heal, but the concept is larger. And we want to talk, capacity build to make this program deployable in any flavor of sports, sports to heal. And Chip, this is just a sneak peek for a documentary that Chip's gonna write and do with Dan, Valeri, Anatoly, and some others, but that'll be for Chip to give another talk on. So I know Mary's gonna, hammer me, give me 2 minutes to just give you a quick touch on the beyond. And this is where the real meat is, because this is the capacity building that we're trying to do. I told you some stories, some projects, but real thing we want to do is we want to build healthcare capacity for a country that is going to have enormous public health issues across the board. And without that, there's no way that they have a chance for their civil society to maintain. Healthcare will be at the center of that. And we've begun to organize, a lot of us that work in that spectrum, and it's become even more important as USAID has been canceled, that we all work together to maximize our efforts, reduce redundancy of efforts. We're anchoring this in some of the best academic institutions in our country. This is just a flavor: Yale, Stanford, Harvard, Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin, and others. These are a lot of the partner NGO organizations. I'm basically calling this the private sector answer for replacing USAID, at least from a healthcare standpoint. We've done conferences where we've talked about the capacity building. I told you, this is us, Oli and I, speaking in Poland and Warsaw. This is RSNA in Chicago, talking about radiology, and this is another radiology conference in Lviv. This was our International Health Summit in Kiev. This was the first ever Women's Leadership in Medicine conference that we hosted in Lviv this past November. We've brought physicians over for training in the United States, over almost 300, including Elena Rincas, including places like Yale, OU, Harvard, Yale, Stanford. We work with members of the Ukrainian government, including Sasha Znovin. If you'll peek, where's John? John, raise your hand. That's John meeting with Sasha, and she was a huge anti-corruption activist who was rooting out corruption in the healthcare system even before the war. Rai Barkat calls her the national asset of Ukraine. But okay, this finishes up. Just you'll find more, as I said, on my LinkedIn page. I post online under the hashtags USA for UA and UA Med. As I've kind of pointed out, this is a big family thing. And I think a lot of you met my father-in-law, Vladko. He was part of our efforts. Well, this talk is dedicated to Vladko. He passed away about a month ago. We're actually taking his remains back to Ukraine on Friday. So this is for Vladko. But thank you all for your attention. I hope I captured your curiosity.
Thank you, Doug. You certainly covered a lot of ground. We just have maybe time for maybe one or two questions here, I think. So Jeff, do you have a quick question?
A million questions. The helicopter had a tag on it, positive psychology. Mm-hmm. And it applies to Ukraine, but also applies to the world that's in a mental health crisis, including Wisconsin. Yep. So what advice do you have for our state and our kids with sports as a bigger purpose, using positive psychology and mattering to help our kids along with Ukraine kids?
So, I mean, my children are a perfect example of this. I mean, our family it has not been, I showed you some highlights or smiling faces, but this has been probably the most difficult 3.5 years of my life and for our family. And our kids, even where we shelter them from it, experience it. And so doing things like we did in Austria, where the kids led the kids. We called them junior, leaders. My daughters speak enough Ukrainian that they became, key elements of that. So engaging kids and getting involved, and part of that with positive psychology, the whole concept really behind it is in some of these limited circumstances that we have, we can't dig deep. We can't do traditional psychology. The scale of the problem is too big. It would be like, as is commonly analogized, it'd be like taking a person to the OR, opening them up, and then not being able to complete the surgery. So positive psychology basically just utilizes the psychological resilience and strengths that people have and allows them to start with that and build through very simple methods and techniques, ways of just reframing thinking, almost like cognitive behavioral therapy. So you can do that with kids, you can do that with adults, And the other big aspect of it is community and family-based. So all of these groups that you see that we've done the camps with, they came from the same city. So when they went home, they're part of group, like communication groups together. Their kids end up playing together. They share, they take it back and they can build it, and then they can, we call it train the trainer. They can take it and they can teach all they thought to other people.
Okay, we have time for one last question, Chuck.
All right. Thank you again for the information and eye-opening. Just with all your visibility and the things you're doing, would you be considered a target at this point?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so I like to tell people the most dangerous thing that I carry, this. So it's very well known that the Russians track every non-Ukrainian cell phone number that pings cell phone towers. And there's no way your phone passively pings cell phone towers. Russia used to have automatic missile targeting prioritizations done based on if multiple, they liked to get a +01 and UK country codes. You can look this up online. There were 3 British SAS retired officers that used really bad OPSEC and got killed because their cell phones pinged and the Russians targeted them. We've had our own warehouse in Ukraine has been hit by strikes, which we don't know for sure, but it coincided with some people visiting them who probably were carrying their cell phones that weren't from Ukraine. You know, I've had cruise missiles fly overhead, including, you can look this up, when I was there for the generator project. It was the first time the Russians actually fired a cruise missile from a submarine that went over a NATO country. It went over Romania. Well, the missile that went over Romania went over us in our warehouse. We heard it. We were like, whoa, what's that? And then we heard it shot down. And so when I'm in Ukraine, I luckily have a lot of friends that, you know, are experts in this. And so I follow their protocols. And if we're doing any particular works, we actually have special security teams.